Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
How the hell are you, Peter?
George, there's so much going on today. How the hell am I? I don't know. Yeah. It changes moment to moment. Right now, I'm pretty good because I'm here with you.
Nice.
You're wearing a bright red sweater.
I am indeed.
Your pants are rolled up. Seriously, man, I need to be shooting and filming you.
One day. We'll get into some reactions.
Yeah, please.
This is Naval Ravikant.
If you find a mountain and you start climbing and you spend your whole life climbing it and you get, say, 2/3 of the way, and then you see the peak is like way up there, but you're 2/3 of the way up. You're still really high up. But now to go the rest of the way, you're going to have to go back down to the bottom and look for another path. Nobody wants to do that. People don't want to start over.
Yeah.
And it's the nature of later in life that you just don't have the time. So it's very painful to go back down and look for a new path, but that may be the best thing to do. And that's why when you look at the greatest artists and creators, they have this ability to start over that nobody else does. Like Elon will, be called an idiot and start over doing something brand new that he supposedly is not qualified for. Or when Madonna or Paul Simon or U2 come out with a new album, their existing fans usually hate it because they've adopted a completely new style that they've learned somewhere else. Okay. And a lot of times they'll just miss completely. Okay. So you have to be willing to be a fool and kind of have that beginner's mind and go back to the beginning to start over.
He took a minute to get there,
you're just getting older.
But that was just it. You have to be willing to be a fool. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to just not care if it doesn't work out, because you can always try it again. The more important thing is that you got out and you tried in the first place. So my reaction, it was a long walk for a ham sandwich. Ultimately, here's what he was saying. It's way more important to be able to make a decision to start over, and don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of what everyone else is going to think. Sometimes the way to the right path is to start completely from the beginning point again. Look, if you're an entrepreneur, you know that anybody who succeeded at anything knows that it's not always a direct straight line. Sometimes you have to change course and change direction to get to the end goal. I think he's right in what he's saying. This resonates with me. But I really am glad I didn't have to watch the rest of the interview before and after this one clip, because he was putting me to sleep.
Yeah, I hear that. All right, cool. Yeah. Well, we'll move on to the next one. Keep it moving. This is from Chris Powers.
Chris!
It's a tweet that he says, "The skills to buying existing real estate could not be more different than the skills to develop new real estate. It took me a long time to learn this. Buying is much, much easier." And then on this second one, he goes, "Hug your local developer. Not all heroes wear capes."
So, George, not only are the skills different, they're completely different businesses. Buying existing assets that are already permitted, zoned, built, and occupied, a completely different business than coming up out of the ground. Let's talk about the differences. When I buy existing, there's cash flow day one. The building's occupied. Maybe there's a vacancy or two, whatever. I can fill them very fast. Maybe I have to make a short list of repairs, whatever. I send the guys in, we can make repairs. Maybe I have to put on a new roof. Who knows? I can do it very, very fast. It's known, it's quantifiable. There's cash flow. The building's occupied, there's cash flow day one. George, if I have to build up out of the ground, there's no cash flow. So big point of difference number one, it's not financeable. So I can get 70, 75% LTV non-recourse financing for an existing asset. On a piece of vacant land, I can't get it. I have to sign personally. I can get maybe 50, 55% LTV. The price is going to be higher. The interest rate's going to be higher that I pay on that debt. And there's going to be more terms and conditions that I'm going to have to comply with in order to keep that debt in line before it triggers a default or some sort of other event that I don't want to have happen. So my financing is way easier for existing assets that are occupied. If I'm building up out of the ground, I have to sign personally on whatever the debt is I'm able to get. I have to sign personally. It's not non-recourse, George. That's a major thing for me. When I build out of the ground, I partner with people who are way more experienced than I am, who are able to build and get through the permitting and entitlement process, and they'll sign on the note. Very different risk-reward profile, very different way to calculate the investment based on risk-adjusted returns. After I get out of the ground, I have to go through a couple of years of the construction process, permitting, sign-offs. I then have to go through lease-up. I have to get my building tenanted. That takes, 6 months to a year, depending on how many units I have. So you're talking about a hold period that's way longer before you get cash flow versus cash flow immediately, day one out of the box when I buy existing assets. They're completely different businesses. They do require completely different skill sets. I'm glad this guy mentioned it. I think that I pointed out here with you in our podcast discussions fairly regularly, but I don't know that many people out there really recognize it or identify that we're talking about two separate things. I mean, people say, oh, you're in real estate. George, real estate has many different facets, many different asset classes, many different ways to be involved in real estate. You know, I'm in multifamily primarily, someone who's in light industrial. It's a completely different business. A lot of it overlaps, a lot of it doesn't. Someone who's building out of the ground, completely different business from what I do, which is buy existing and improve existing. You know, you have to find your lane within real estate. Are you a developer, builder? Are you an asset manager? Are you a property manager? Are you a buy existing and renovate? You know, single family homes, short-term rentals, broker, finance, mortgage debt provider, like whatever your lane is in the industry of real estate, find it, get great at it, pick another one or two, get great at those, and they start to overlap and you get some economies of scale and some efficiencies. But it's a completely different thing, and I'm glad that you pointed this out. And this guy, Chris, thanks, man. Yeah, shout out for me for that, because I think people don't really recognize the different areas of real estate. And if you're a builder, developer versus a renovator or a value add person, I'm a value add guy.
Yeah.
I do some building as well, but I'm primarily value add. And I just don't want the risks associated with being a builder 24/7. I can't have my entire capital that's out on the street be associated with building risk. So I put the bulk of it in existing assets that are value add, put a little bit in building, combined together. It's a nice return for me and I can manage it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Sounds great. We'll head over to the table.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, George.
Oh, Peter.
Don't get me on it today. Don't do it.
Don't get on what?
Don't do it.
On what? What don't you want me to get on?
Don't do it.
Oh, are we going to talk about rent control?
Don't do it, George. I asked you not to do it.
I forgive that.
Did you ever have a moment where you feel like you're alone in a deep, dark, cavernous place by yourself, and it happens over such a long period of time that you're questioning your very existence and your being, and you're wondering if you even have a place on the earth and what we're all doing here, like shit like that?
Yeah.
So that's the way I felt for the past 15 years of my life as it comes to price controls in our housing industry. And that includes rent controls, but it also includes other things that we've talked about many times here before. And I feel like I'm alone in a vast desert with no food, water, without a compass, without clothing or shelter, just like naked in a fucking Mars-like environment.
Yeah.
And that changed this morning.
How did it change?
Because I woke up and saw this article by a person who I've never even heard of before, Jay Parsons.
Okay. Yeah.
He's an economist in Texas. I was reading what he wrote, and I have it here in front of me so that I get it right for our audience.
Yeah.
You know, he talks about 14 things. And I'm going to go out on a limb that 14 out of 14 of these things that he talks about, we've addressed and spoken about here on the show. It's all I talk about in my life. It's all I've been focusing on for the past couple of decades, are these 14 points that he summarized very succinctly and briefly and accurately here.
Were the ones that jumped out at you that were like, oh, this is the one that really people haven't been talking
Well,
about?
a couple
like,
things jump out. Pricing controls in housing is not a partisan issue. It's science. It's economics, science. It's not a debatable thing. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That's what he's saying. Like, you can't really spin it Any other way, the numbers are the numbers. I've always felt that way. Regretfully, the discussions about housing policy and price controls in our housing industry have been very, very partisan because it sort of got dumbed down to the point where like pro-tenant advocates, pro-pricing control advocates are like usually liberal, and it's happening in the liberal states and the blue states, and maybe the opposition voices to that are typically more conservative, and like people fuel that, and when the campaigns and elections come around, it ends up being that, and it goes back and forth like that, tit for tat, which is never productive. So I love what this guy Parsons says. Rent control is rare because history shows us, and there's many examples in history that shows us this, that it doesn't work as intended. Rent control is a short-term fix for current residents at the expense of long-term affordability for a much broader population. Man, I mean, I remember in one of my towns, we were going through this exact discussion like a year and a half ago during a campaign for and against rent control. The town was coming out debating it. Let's have a long-term vision. Let's not just slap up some very quickly thought out legislation to appease voters here, now, today. Mm-hmm. If the issue is pricing controls and housing and affordability and the lack of supply, let's address the supply. Right. George, what do I say every week with you?
It's all about supply and demand. Build, build, build.
Every week I say it.
Yeah.
It's all I say to people every day of my life. I'll pick another one. The science of the economics tells us that rent control not only limits new supply, but also leads to the removal of existing supply. So even lessening the amount of housing stock that's in the marketplace for people to live in. And what does he mean by that? People will convert a rental product to condominiums. They'll just get out. It becomes too expensive. It's too burdensome, cumbersome, legislatively overreaching. It's expensive. You don't get the rent increases. Right now, we're in an environment where rents are increasing due to a lot of different factors. Lack of supply, inflation has never been higher than right now, and rents track with inflation. But in towns that are price controlled and rent controlled, rents can't track with inflation. So that means the housing stock doesn't get maintained. My company, we had to lay off 6 people because of price control and rent control legislation. Yeah. Oh, here's a great one. Rent control primarily benefits wealthier households who don't need the benefit. George, in the same market I was just talking about, 90% of my renter population is a high income, high credit score residents, but they live in apartments that it's like a mid-teens income to rent ratio. Yep. So that means that it's very, very affordable for them because they make a lot of money, but yet they're price controlled. I can't increase them because they're rent controlled, and they make $150,000, $250,000. It's a crazy thing. So he goes on to say, case in point, former New York Mayor Ed Koch for decades kept a $475 a month apartment in high-end Greenwich Village, which meant that he and many others received benefits of rent control, but they weren't qualified to receive the benefits of rent control. Charlie Rangel was another one. I don't know if you follow New York politics, but Rangel had combined 2 rent-controlled apartments up in Harlem. Ed Koch and Rangel, I don't think that rent control laws were meant for them. Yeah. There's old stories that continue even today about people that live in Classic Sixes on Park Avenue that have houses out in East Hampton, and they pay $813 for their 4,000 whatever square foot apartment on Park Avenue. They pay rent there because the house is in their name out in the Hamptons, and the house in the Hamptons is $20 million. So they're getting over on the system. How many of those people are there? Hundreds and thousands. In New York, there's thousands.
And this goes back to the thing that we've said about laws being rhetorical victories, but not actually doing the thing they're set out to do.
Rhetorical victories.
Yeah.
Did you just think of that?
That one I did think of. That one's
rhetorical victories?
Yeah,
it's great. It's true.
Yeah.
He likens price controls to Soviet-era market controls that lead to like deep depression, market conditions, and black markets and crime and poverty. It all does. People say, oh, well, what about Europe? What about Canada? You know how fucked up Europe and Canada is with their housing policies? There's no supply. Why is there no supply? Rent control. In Toronto, they have seriously egregious rent control. No one can build anything. You can't increase rent. So you know what happens? The stuff that does get built gets built as high-end stuff.
Because they're
very
trying to
expensive.
make up for the
well, yeah,
low-
you can't fit into the lower tier or the middle tier because it's too regulated.
Yeah.
So you build the higher tier, and people buy that, and they either live in it or they rent it out. It's like a quasi workaround for rent.
Right.
But it's not controlled. It's not legislated. It's still very expensive. There's no affordability. If you have a water shortage, you need more water. If you have a food shortage, you need more food. If you have a housing shortage, you need more housing. You need to build more housing supply. You can't regulate and legislate. Why? Like, it's the same thing every week. Anyway, this guy's talking about all that stuff. He's got 14 points. I want to put a link to the Ray Parsons article so that our viewers can link to it and stop listening to me rant about it. But I dig that this guy wrote about it. I don't feel alone in the desert anymore. I feel like I've got one brother in arms, and I'm going to report back more. I'm going to try and develop a relationship with this guy Parsons, because I love meeting people who are like-minded.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Who we think alike.
Yeah.
So this guy Parsons also reminds us that rent controls and market controls are very bipartisan. It's not like one side's pushing for it and the other side pushes back. There's been Nobel Peace Prize winning economists on both sides that are both against rent control. And so, it tends to be a partisan issue. It's really not. It's science. George, it's like the mask and vaccination debate. For the past 2 years, people are like, the science, follow the science. It's all about the science. Get vaccinated, wear a mask. It's all about the science, right? Guys, rent control and housing legislations that limit supply scientifically shows that limiting supply creates a dearth of affordability. It's math 101. If you need more housing supply because shit got too expensive, build it. No. Don't regulate what you have. Don't make it difficult for new stuff to come online. Build it.
I would say there's plenty of people who did not follow the science with pandemic. So I think it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's whatever's convenient to believe. That's what people.
Whatever's convenient, baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
Mayors and town council people and city council people all over. Whatever's convenient for you. They should really start deploying vision and economic policy and real business sense. You're running a business, running a town or a state. You're running a business. You have to balance a budget and implement costs and manage revenues and staff and the general public. It's a business.
Yeah, and the system so often doesn't incentivize in that way. I was listening to a podcast with Moses Kagan, who we've reacted to before in the Reaction Room, and he said he's out in LA and talking about the eviction moratorium. This was an old podcast back when that was happening, but that the eviction moratorium in LA was there was.
You mean the free rent period?
So the free rent period went to, I think it's 2023 was when the legislation was passed. It was like there's a deadline in 2023, but the only other way that it can get removed is that the mayor would have to remove it, which would be a terrible political move, for any.
Let's wait until these new mayoral elections in Los Angeles. We spoke about a candidate that I support, Caruso. I think he's going to be great for LA. I have no idea what his stance is on rent controls and eviction moratoriums and anything like that. But he's a lawyer. He's got business experience. He knows how to run businesses and run companies. And, I think he'll be great for LA. By the way, you said something interesting just now. They don't make it too incentivizing for people to run for public office. Let's talk about like the Senate and Congress, right? We've been identifying for years how they have these salaries and they get reelected with, just over and over again. And they have this healthcare, like they're not on our healthcare system. They're on their own healthcare system.
Yeah.
Is that enough is that like acceptable incentive? Like, is that now okay because it's such a shitty job? Like without it, they wouldn't be doing it, and we need these people. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say something. I think that Senate healthcare program, I think it's great, and they should have it. And I'm not mad that they have it. And I'm not mad that it's way, way better than what I have. They should have it. They're leaders. They earn their way there. That's where they are in the food chain. People higher up in the food chain get better benefits in life. That's the way it goes. But I'd like to have the same opportunity to get it and work for it and achieve it. So I may not be happy with my existing health care, but if I want what they have, look, I'm not going to run for elected office, but I'd like to have some other path to getting something like what they have. So I'm not going to sit back and bitch and moan that they have that healthcare program and I don't. but I am going to work my ass off to make sure that I can get as close to it as possible, as dictated by my own work ethic and by my own determination and drive and tenacity to succeed. So I want that to be what dictates whether I get to have that healthcare plan or not. I don't want it given to me. I want to earn it. I think they've earned it. Look, they have to run for public office. They're in the media every day. They've got like no life. Their phones are bugged. They've got paparazzi on. Like it's
got
no
people
way
talking
to
about
live.
him on a podcast.
And we need someone there to make decisions. Look, I'm not happy with everyone that's there making decisions. There's idiots on both sides of the aisle, and it's like painful to watch. But I recognize that when you get to where they are in the food chain, you get certain perks. That's their perks. So I think people that have earned their way and worked their way to a certain spot and there's perks, they can have those perks. They're entitled to those perks. May not be fair, but you know what is fair? You have the opportunity to try and do it too. That part's fair. Equal opportunity, man, not equal result. Did I just say that? Ooh.
You did.
Is that inflammatory? Is that incendiary?
Some people will find it incendiary. Yeah. Absolutely. You're talking about the wealthy, the powerful. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon.
Have you ever heard that song that's on the internet in these memes? Jeffrey Bezos.
I think you're talking about,
Go Jeffrey.
I think you're talking about Bo Burnham from Inside. Yes.
Oh, it's hysterical. I never.
Jeffrey Bezos.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Bezos. Jeffrey Bezos. Jeffrey Bezos.
Yeah,
It's great.
Yeah, you should watch. Maybe you shouldn't watch that movie, but it's that. I've said to a friend of mine that movie should be shown in classes years from now.
What's the movie?
It's called Inside, and it's by Bo Burnham, and it's basically his experience of the pandemic in a building. But it's fantastic. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So I was talking about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. You and I were talking earlier about Amazon and the effect that it's had on the supply chain.
So not only has Amazon disrupted retail across the whole entire world for everybody, everywhere, but they're disrupting construction now. So what's happening is 1/3 of our country's steel supply is going to Amazon. They're building so many warehouses and so many distribution facilities that they need all of the building materials they can get their hands on and all of the labor and contracting services they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
And there's like nothing available for the rest of us. So that's in part why there's such a logjam with supply chain for construction materials, concrete, steel. The big contractors, like the big corporate level contractors, they're all busy with Amazon. 1/3 of the steel is going to Amazon. I mean, I'm building a house, George, right now. I need steel for it. I can't get it. I got to wait.
Because of Amazon.
I think in part because of Amazon.
Yeah.
That's why I took note of that article, because I'm like, oh shit, I'm getting hosed by steel delays too.
Yeah. But it's interesting because it's because of demand. They're building more warehouses to satisfy the demand.
It's incredible. But let's just follow the bouncing ball for a second.
Yeah.
They're taking all the steel, they're building more warehouses and distribution facilities because they have to put all of their goods that they're selling somewhere. They're growing so fast. I mean, this is like an indicator. It indicates to me that they're going to be fucking busy for the forthcoming future.
Yeah.
Like there's no denying it.
Yeah.
Like they're stocking up for battle. They're building warehouses. They're taking steel away from everybody else. They're commandeering all of the labor force so that they can build out this infrastructure, this massive infrastructure. I don't know. You're thinking about like, well, what's the world look like 5 years, 10 years from now? It looks like more Amazon distribution facilities everywhere. How do you play that? You can buy the common stock. You can, have a business that's located within the immediate orbit of one of these places and provide some sort of service. They all need maintenance. They all need repair. Now they've got regional contracts for all this stuff. But look, whatever your business is, I think you can find a way to touch the Amazon effect here. We operate apartment buildings in areas where there's some of these distribution and warehouse facilities. We're housing a lot of Amazon employees. So that's how it touches us. And then the other way it touches us is that I now have to wait a bunch of time for my steel for my house.
Right.
Look, if you're out there, if you see this crazy growth, if you're talking at the bar and the dinner table about Amazon and the growth and the buildings that they're putting everywhere, how do you get involved? Are you just going to sit back and talk about it? Do you have a business that can somehow get involved with that and provide some sort of service or product to Amazon to help facilitate its growth? I mean, it's daunting, the growth that they're experiencing.
Like we're at the beginning of the wave now. You better start paddling.
They're going to need utilities. They're going to need services of all kinds to run these big distribution centers, employees. They have to employ so many people. And there's this whole debate. It's more than a debate. There's this whole condition present in our labor market now with wages and a rising wage environment. And people are of all different income brackets are potentially earning a little bit more money. I just got back from Colorado, and Vail Resorts made minimum wage at Vail Mountain $20 an hour for all their employees. Oh, wow. Which I thought was a huge move. It was $15 before, so it went from 15 to 20. That's 5 on 15. That's a 33.33% jump in wages.
Yeah.
So we're talking about inflation being 8.5%, 9%. That was 33%.
Yeah, that's a huge,
right.
Huge jump.
Just one line item in the P&L of the company was 33%.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you about that myself. Was that Colorado housing prices have doubled since I think like 2019. And you've been in Colorado for forever. I was wondering, 30
years.
What has changed over those years that you've observed, and are you optimistic about the future? Is that scary to you?
So the mountain areas, not just Colorado, it's different than in lowland areas because it's flatter, longer.
Right. Yep.
In the mountain areas, you can only build in the valleys and in certain slopes on the mountains. A lot of the land is just not buildable. There's sort of a natural shortage of available land to build on anyway, just because if it's too steep, there's only so much you can do, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So there's that already exists. And people love the mountains. It's sort of got this very chill, outdoor, recreational love for the outdoor vibe going on, and people love that.
Yeah.
If you look at the lists that come out, they rank the healthiest states to live in, whatever these, I don't know how they determine that.
Right.
Colorado's always 1 or 2 because everyone's an outdoor lover. They're always riding their bikes or skiing or walking or cross-country skiing. The dogs in Colorado are the happiest dogs you've ever seen in your life. They all have smiles ear to ear. They're bleh.
Super fit dogs.
Yeah, and the people are also super fit. Yeah. I love telling the story about how I got lapped by a 77-year-old woman who was on a 1-speed beach cruiser bike with a bell and a basket and tassels hanging off the handlebar. And I'm on my Colnago, my carbon fiber Colnago, and I'm trying to ride up Vail Pass, and I'm I don't go fast, but I go.
Yeah.
And she whoa, just
amazing.
Like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Like she was on a motorcycle.
Those are goals.
And it's because she's a lifelong Colorado resident. Her lungs are acclimated, and her whole cardiovascular system's acclimated to pump, an efficient amount of blood oxygen levels to all the muscles, and they're machines.
Man.
But I digress. So what have I seen with housing and real estate? So all of the mountain areas, not just resorts, but even Boulder, right? Which is considered a mountain area, even though it's more urban. Front Range and closer to Denver. So expensive. It's become unaffordable because people want to be in the mountains and they want to be in these healthy communities that have all the outdoor amenities. And all the resort areas, of course, have gotten very, very expensive. Like the coastal areas, the mountains are places where people want to be. They don't want to be in these densely packed urban centers longer than they need to be. Mm-hmm. Downtown Denver, downtown Houston, downtown Chicago, they all want to leave those places and come to the mountains. In fact, 90% of the mountain constituency where I hang out in Colorado are from Denver, obviously Denver because it's close, but Chicago and Texas because they have quick flights, direct flights, and people just want to get the hell out of Chicago. You can't do shit there in the winter. Yeah. So they come to recreate in the mountains in Colorado. And Houston gets way too hot in the summer, so they come up, spend their summers in Colorado, and people want to be there. It's like the beach. Like places like New York and San Francisco, it's become too expensive, and you can't live if you're a moderate income person, or if you're an average person, it's become really impossible to live. You can't find anything that you can afford because there's no supply. In fact, a lot of the ski resorts in Colorado had to close early because they didn't have enough employees to work the lifts and work the restaurants and work the ticket lines. So typically they close around April 21st or April 25th. And it was just skeleton crew for pretty much the April 7th on.
And you think that's because housing has become so expensive?
It's become so expensive. Yeah. And because they hadn't yet increased the wages. People were making $15 an hour in a town where they can't live. There's nothing available. They have to share a place with 18 people. in the mountain areas, there's really not any new employers moving in any great numbers. And so, and there's no new housing supply being built, and everyone's sort of battling over the existing housing supply.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. So I've seen it become a lot less affordable, and a lot more people have moved in. They want the jobs. They want the mountain lifestyle. They want the employment in these mountain centers. There's just nowhere to live. These are areas that used to be $1,000, $1,500 a foot for the new construction. At most, it was $1,500.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, you started seeing $3,000 a foot for the really super high end new construction in the mountain areas.
Yeah.
And now you're pushing into $6,000 a foot.
Yeah.
It's a lot for a
that's
mountain town.
That's crazy. Yeah, I want to continue with this concept of prices rising. Raising rents. There's a lot of misinformation surrounding raising rents. And it's not really a popular topic to necessarily talk about, but it's crucial, I would imagine, to your business. What's a good way to go about this? What's a bad way to go about this? What are strategies and tactics that you have kind of gathered over time to
You're asking me how do I increase prices when I need to increase prices?
And what do people need to understand? Because I think a lot of people don't even understand, why is this fucking landlord raising my rent?
I'm a free market guy.
Yeah.
The market dictates what I do with my prices.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Well, it should be nothing else. Unfortunately, there's other things such as housing policies and price controls. But really, there should be nothing else. I should be able to dictate my pricing in a free market environment. If I'm priced too high, I should get bitch slapped and rejected because I didn't offer the right price value product to my consumer. Mm-hmm. And if I'm successful at setting prices, I should be accepted by the marketplace and accepted by the consumer, and I should be renting up. My rents track with property taxes, number one. We're not in control of property taxes. Right. Our local governments are. So you hear me talking all the time about how our civic leaders and local leaders have to really be good at running businesses, and our cities are businesses.
Yeah.
This is a prime example. If my property taxes go up 10 grand and I have a 20-unit building that's $500 a unit divided by 12 months, that's like $41 a month that I have to raise everybody's rent to pay for that $10,000 tax increase. I need the cities to manage their budgets and manage their revenue so that they don't have to increase my property taxes. If they don't increase my property taxes, that's one major thing that I can check off that I'm not going to be looking for to see if I have to raise rents.
Right. Yep.
So property taxes is one thing. The borrowing environment, my cost of capital is another. So as interest rates rise, I have to raise rents to be able to service debt. So that's another big one. So we're in a rising interest rate environment, obviously, right now. So that's one of the reasons why rents track with inflation, because inflation tracks with treasuries and interest rates. So it's all sort of tied together. As interest rates rise, so do rents. Those are the two biggest ones. After that, I'm looking at microeconomic factors. If I need to raise rents to pay for certain capital improvements, or if I need to increase revenue with the building to pay for certain services or amenities that we introduced into the building that have to get paid for.
Right.
I mean, just think about it. Like you've got like a rent roll that the building generates every month, and it's very recurring and very predictable and very regular. Yeah. And if you all of a sudden have to build like storage closets for your residents to use, that can cost, I don't know, $80,000 to go into a basement area and start building storage cages and with lock-offs and whatever for people to use for their bikes and their storage bins and whatever they want to put in there. So that $80,000 just doesn't come out of some savings account somewhere. So in our industry, we have to charge rent in order to pay for the $80,000. Now, we don't charge $80,000 worth of rent right away, but what we'll look to do is be able to recapture the $80,000 in this example over, say, 5 years worth of collecting rents. And that's typically how property owners in our industry make capital improvements or introduce new amenities and services into a residential area. So I'm following one or all of those three catalysts that I just mentioned. So we've got taxes, which the city dictates. We've got the economic environment and interest rates, which track with inflation and other macroeconomic drivers. And we've got the property owner introducing any capital expenditures or new services and amenities into the building. It all has to get paid for somehow. That's what running a business is. That's what makes it's very important for our civic leaders and town leaders and elected officials to know how to run a business because they have to pay for things in the town. You have to raise the money from somewhere.
Yeah.
So when property owners introduce these new products and services into the buildings or put on new roofs or redo landscaping or parking lots, that money has to come from somewhere. So typically it comes from rents that get spread out and amortized over maybe 3 or 7 years. I average out at 5.
You have a great relationship with your tenants. How do you frame that conversation with them, that messaging?
Sometimes there's no conversation.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there is a conversation where we say, hey, you'll notice starting next Thursday, the work trucks are going to be at the property. We're doing new landscaping. We're putting in new bike racks and we're putting in new security cameras and redoing the parking lot and whatever. So please excuse our appearance and also the inconvenience of the work being done. And you'll see a rent increase of $25 a month. $25 a month across 20 units is $500 a month. It's $6,000 a year. If I'm going to do a $30,000 CapEx, it's 5 years. I recoup the $6,000 if I bump everybody $25.
Right.
I think we can all agree $25 is not such a big price to pay for new amenities and freshening up of buildings and new parking lots and enclosed, fenced-in rubbish areas and new hallways and like whatever.
Providing service.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
As rents rise, do you, and specifically as rents rise on Class B products, do you ever worry that will then bump up against Class A in competition? Is that something?
So you're suggesting that Class A doesn't rise with the tide, but somehow B is the only thing that rises? Because if that were the case in George's fantasy land, then eventually Class B catches up with Class A. I'm not even going to talk about this anymore because it's not realistic. So in economics, there's a phrase called a rising tide lifts all boats. So that's what happens in our business in housing and multifamily housing. So as our Class B product gets nicer and nicer and nicer, does Class B go to A minus or does Class B stay Class B? Because the A is also rising and getting better, achieving new heights and new boundaries that it's pushing in amenities and services up in the Class A level. So that's what happens, George, is that the Class A rises too, and the Class B will rise, and the Class C and D will rise too. You'll start to see very old properties that have lots of deferred maintenance and suffer from lots of neglect over the years. They're going to start to see improvement.
Yeah.
But a rising tide lifts all boats. The B doesn't go to A minus in a vacuum. It never catches up with the A. There's always A, there's always B, and there's always C.
The whole market's moving.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm a millennial, as you know.
Oh, it's one of my favorite things about you. I love it.
And I don't plan to rent forever, but a survey in 2020 came out that said 18% of millennials plan to rent forever.
I'm shocked that it was only 18%.
I am too, actually. That is lower than I expected. But I was curious, as mortgages, get near 5%, or I think maybe
they're over 5%.
They're over 5% now. Yeah,
they're going to get near 6%.
Yeah, do you see this as a permanent option?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I think it's so. First of all, I'm going to go on the record and say I don't know what article you read, but it's not 18% of millennials are going to rent forever. It's going to be like 58% of millennials are going to rent forever. Mark my words. It's a massive number. It's not 18%.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, it's completely a permanent feature of our society moving forward. You've heard me say it before. I've been saying it for years, probably a decade now. The phrase renter nation. We're a country of renters, and it's all happening right now. All the renters are going through the funnel, and the funnel's getting narrower and narrower and narrower. There's fewer options. They're going to remain renters for a long, long time. Many are going to be bummed about it. Many are going to be happy about it. They're like, look, I'm cool being a renter.
Yeah.
I don't have to tie up my capital in a house. I don't have to worry what markets are going to do. I pay the rent. If I don't want to pay the rent, I move. Like I can find a less expensive place to live. I can find a more expensive place to live. I can find a lower amenity property. I can find a higher amenity property. That's the beauty about a free market. Now, it used to be that the American dream was all about home ownership and buying a home and living in the home for 30 years in that one spot. And you'd commute to work 20 minutes away and commute back home 20 minutes and have dinner. And after 30 years, you paid off your mortgage and you had a property that was probably worth more and it was paid off. There was no debt on it.
Yeah.
That was the model from post-war euphoria in the 50s up until like the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, even a little later. That was the model.
Yeah.
But now that's not the deal anymore. the American dream, if we have to recreate a definition for what the American dream is today, like home ownership is not on the list as high up as it used to be. Now people want freedom. They want quality of life, whatever that means. It's different for everybody. They want work-life balance, whatever that means. It's different for everybody. Don't get me started. But home ownership is no longer high up on the list. It requires capital, which people either don't have or they don't want to tie down in home. Owning a home is like having an anvil strapped around your ankle in an ocean. Like it's just pulling you down. Like you want to move somewhere, you want to travel, you want to put your kid in a different school, you want to try out a different neighborhood, or like you got to sell your house. Maybe you can sell it, maybe you can't. Maybe you can make money, maybe you can break even, maybe you can't. Then you have to pay all the closing costs, taxes, and fees, yada, yada. Like, it's not such an easy, smooth, fluid, mobile, flexible thing anymore to own a home if you're a young person.
Yeah.
So it's definitely here to stay permanently. More and more people are going to rent permanently. Less and less people are going to be buying homes. It's going to be that way for decades to come. I don't foresee it ever changing.
Yeah.
And it's been trending that way for a while. It's really been exacerbated by the past couple of years because it weeds out all the bullshit. Right. So the bullshit from the past couple of years is that, like, I want to work from home. I don't need to commute. I don't need to live in a shit-ass city that I don't want to live in, or, I want to live in the mountains, or I want to live in like we were just talking about the mountains. It used to be like, oh, I want that because I see the wealthy people do that. So like, I want to do that because it makes me feel like I'm successful. So I'm going to want those things.
Yeah.
But like now it's like, fuck, I want what I want. I don't care how much money I have or don't have. Like mobile, technology, whatever. I'm going to live where I live. I'm going to have an outdoor lifestyle. I'm going to have like a high quality of life. Maybe my earnings will be trending higher. Maybe not. I don't care. It's okay because I don't have to live in an expensive place. Everybody's coming out with these lists on all these less expensive, affordable cities that are hot now because they're affordable and people are going there. Yeah. I mean, that'll be the case for a year until they're not affordable anymore because people have all moved there. Yeah. And then there'll be another list of new places where people are moving to. But everyone is leaving California and New York and San Francisco and LA and all these places, and they're going to, we've all seen where they went. Yeah. Texas, Arizona, they go to Nashville.
Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
Sheboygan. Charlotte's a big one.
Right, yeah.
Charlotte's a big one. Yeah. Like renting's how you win. If you know you're going to be in the same fucking place for 30 years and you have the money and you don't care about tying up the money, by all means, go out in the marketplace, pay a high price for a house, and that's where you're going to live for 30 years. And you're never going to get your capital out of there.
Yeah, and even with that, we've said before how rent is the max, mortgage is the minimum that you pay.
Come on, man.
So that's one of those things.
So yeah, I think it's here to stay. Yeah. We're a nation of renters. It's only going to become more so.
You've heard me say before that I want to make T-shirts that say "Stay close to your asset." So maybe we'll do that one day. But
large.
Not every
V-neck.
V-neck, fantastic. I'll do that. Not everyone wants to stay close to their asset. I'm talking about this. I read this article about Poplar Homes raising money for their kind of prop tech business to be a third-party property manager.
They want easy.
Yeah.
They don't want to do the work.
Yeah. So I'm curious.
They want to be an owner. Yeah, they don't want to do the work.
Exactly. Do you see this as a natural progression of technology, or do you think this will peter out because of the kind of the fundamental truth?
First of all, I take offense to your use of the phrase peter out.
I didn't do that on purpose. I'm sorry.
Second of all, I do see this as a feature of our world today. Like I see long-term home ownership trends declining and renter trends increasing.
Yep.
I see people looking for the easy way out. They want to own without doing the work. That's like the classic problem that I have with young people today and a lot of society today. Like they don't want to do the work, but they want to be in a beach earning income, passive income. Yeah. They don't want to work. They want to have work-life balance. They want to make $1 million and they want to work from their underwear on their porch. Like whatever these things are that people put on their Instagram posts, right?
Sounds great.
That makes them look like baller. It sounds great. Yeah. It doesn't exist. There is no wealth without work. So let's get that straight, number one. Number two, there is no ownership of anything without work. So prop tech and other technologies that can be tools to aid in any business, in real estate or any other business to make things more efficient, That's one thing.
Yeah.
Efficiencies are great.
Yeah.
Making things faster, smoother, quicker, better, cheaper. That's great.
Yeah.
But like this whole thing about like absentee ownership and no work ownership, and I want to own, and like everyone's an owner and everyone's full of shit is what everyone is. No one owns anything who's like looking to own without putting work in, or looking to be wealthy without putting the work in.
Is that a phrase, no work ownership? Is that something that like is floating around?
I don't know,
Yeah.
I didn't read the article that you read, but the way you're describing it to me, it's like deploying these technologies because they want to own things without doing work. And it's just like, dude, there's no such thing.
Right.
I'm not here to sell you anything, so I can just tell it to you straight.
Right.
Everyone's full of shit. People that are on the internet that claim to be wealthy, that claim to be millionaires and billionaires, and this whole culture of vernacular that's out there about like entrepreneurship and success, and like everyone's full of shit. They're trying to sell you something. They're probably trying to sell you a course or coaching, or I don't. They've got some like public relations agenda. I don't know. We're just here shooting the shit because I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Like I invest in this because I enjoy it.
Totally. Yeah.
But so just be careful who you consume your media from and what the messages are that they're giving you, because there is no wealth without work. There is no ownership without being able to pay for it. And you can't pay for it unless you have the money. The money comes from work and success and wealth. I mean, it's all connected.
Yeah.
So go out and get your prop tech and your fintech and your whatever tech to make your business streamlined and efficient, and to help out a little bit over here and improve over there a little bit. But otherwise, there's no easy way. It just all sounds like a quick, buck, or a quick path to success, or a quick way to own something without work. I don't even know. Like my mind just goes in a lot of different directions when you tell me about that. But
well, that's the first thing. I think literally the first thing we posted on this account was, it's not get rich quick, it's get rich for sure. And that's the
it's a marathon, not a sprint, man.
Yeah, exactly. No,
yeah,
totally.
It bothers me when I hear you and others talk about these articles that are out there and people that are out there talking about just like how to be rich without a lot of work, or how to own assets without the work, or without, I don't know, man, just all the variations on that. It's just like, it doesn't exist, people. You're highly misguided if you think that that's a thing that you can chase.
We've covered a number of real estate definitions on this show, and they always do well, and we haven't done it in a while.
Real estate definitions?
Yeah. So just wanted to get into a few things.
Welcome to Real Estate Definitions.
So I just had three that I've come across a couple times in this podcast and other podcasts I've listened to, and I wanted you to kind of riff on them. So
Fartipited.
Fartipited. Is that a word? I've never heard of fartipited.
Sorry. What were you asking?
No, I was just asking. So I have these three phrases that I come across. I wanted to know.
What are they?
Yeah. So earnest money is the first one.
Earnest money.
Yeah. What can you tell me about earnest money?
So some states use that phrase, earnest money. Mm-hmm. Others just refer to it as a contract deposit. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a deposit on a contract.
Yep.
It goes into an escrow, either held by the buyer's attorney or title company, or the seller's attorney or title company. It sits there until the parties comply with the terms of the contract.
Yeah.
If the parties comply, then earnest money gets released to the seller. The transaction concludes and a buy and a sell occurs.
Yep.
If the parties don't comply, then that earnest money sits there, or that contract deposit sits there and gets fought over. Hey, send me back my deposit. No, you didn't comply. Yes, I did. You were the one who didn't comply. No, you didn't comply. I complied. And then the lawyers start writing letters, and then there's a lawsuit, and they fight over the contract deposit.
Sounds super fun.
Yeah, well, it's a reality in business and in real estate transactions, but that's what earnest money is. California uses the term escrow. I'm in escrow. Hey, how you doing on the sale of your house? We're in escrow.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, we say, I'm under contract. Hey, how you doing on the sale of your house? I'm under contract. But it's all just the same way to talk about contract deposit, a deposit on a contract.
Got it.
You sign, you put down a 5 or 10%, whatever deposit. That's the earnest money.
Opportunity zone. What's an opportunity?
OZ, opportunity zone. Yeah. That is a more recent term in our world, which was introduced during the Trump era. And it was legislation that was set to create an incentive to invest in blighted areas. And people lobbied for the maps to be drawn in certain ways so that it included certain areas. And our government memorialized these zones on the maps and called them opportunity zones. And it allowed capital to flow into the OZs and not be taxable. So you could defer capital gains into a purchase of property in an opportunity zone. If you hold that property for 10 years, you never have to pay taxes on it.
Wow.
So people flooded money into these OZs and they bought old warehouse buildings and old whatever properties, and they're just sitting there. And then eventually they sort of get around to getting a site survey done and a site plan done, and maybe they'll develop it or maybe they'll sell it because someone they sell it to could use that land. If 10 years goes by, they'll sell it and they won't have to pay taxes on it. It was a great way to incentivize investment and also to defer capital gains taxes on the sale of whatever you sold to have the money to be able to invest in the first place. It's not without its arguments and controversies, but I think by and large it's been a pretty good thing.
Preferred return or preferred equity?
Those are two different things. So, all right, capital stack. We've talked about capital stack.
Yeah.
So in a capital stack, you can often see something called preferred equity. There's common equity, there's preferred equity. There's different tiers of the debt, first position, second position, third position, just giving examples here. So the preferred equity is equity, not debt, and there's some set of terms that are preferential to the holders of preferred equity. So perhaps they have a liquidation preference, which what that means is that upon the sale of the company or asset, the preferred equity holders get paid out first. Perhaps the preferred equity means that they get a preferred return. There's the combination of the two. So a preferred return would be an allocation of a certain percentage of dollars to first going to the preferred equity holders.
Got it.
So preferred equity is just a form of equity in the capital stack that comes with it certain entitlements and benefits that the common equity doesn't have. The preferred return is something that is inherent in a certain class of stock or ownership that may not exist in other classes of stock or ownership. So you often see preferred return in what's called a waterfall or priority of distribution. So if there's a capital event through a sale or a refinancing and there's a bunch of money sitting in an account waiting to get distributed to the various levels of people in the capital stack, people that have a preferred return get paid out first. They don't have to be preferred equity holders. They could be regular common equity holders that just get a preferred return. That could be the terms of the deal in the LLC operating agreement or subscription agreement that everyone signed up for when they invested. So preferred return is really just a way to allocate some initial dollars to people that took risk or have certain ownership of class of either the debt or the equity, because a preferred return can go to debt too.
Fantastic. Man, we've covered a whole hell of a lot today.
Did we?
I think we did. Yeah. I'll know when I go back to edit this, but it feels like we covered a lot. Yeah. Anything else you want to touch on before we head over to Q&A?
Yeah, one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you asked me if I wanted to talk about it. I said no. So I'll just I'll sort of skip to third base and just ask you: do you think that Elon is doing the Twitter deal because he really cares about freedom of speech, or because his customer acquisition cost is $110 per user because Twitter has 400 million users divided into the billions that he's paying for? It turns out to be $110 of CAC. Or do you think it's a way to compete with, look, Apple is getting into the car business and they've got iPhones where they can push messaging out and advertise their cars. Yeah. Is this now a method for him to do that? Like, what's the real agenda here?
Yeah.
Do you think?
For me, I mean, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think there's a lot of overlap. I think yes, he does care about free speech, whether or not it will actually result in free speach on Twitter. That remains to be seen.
Well, I care about free speech, but I want to make some fucking money first.
Yeah, 100%. So I think those things overlap. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
And then how do you balance the whole pro free speech thing on Twitter with like limiting who get the pedophiles and the terrorists and all this, this world that we live in? Like, how do you limit that?
Yeah, I think that's where I'm cautious about whether or not he's going to actually be able to do what he's set out to do, in that unless you're having a chronological timeline, which is what all these things start with, but eventually goes away because AI is better for marketing and making money. If there's AI at all, I don't see how you can avoid suppressing certain voices and lifting other voices up, because that's just naturally what happens in an algorithmic situation. So I think if anyone can figure it out, I'm open to Elon Musk being able to figure it out, but I don't know, how he's going to do that.
Sounds like it's free speech as long as you don't say anything that's offensive to young kids.
Or I think the other way around, that I think the more offensive you are, you could potentially then get people looking at that tweet more often. And so then now your voice is louder than everyone else's. So I think it's one of those things.
I
don't know.
Forever I've been of the mind, like, look, let the crazy people speak. Like, the louder a voice they get, the more everyone else is going to hear like how fucking nuts they are.
Right.
And they'll just die on their own sword. But I worry about these extremist voices that post stuff about, like, with racial hate and terrorism and the Taliban and whatever crazy, like, I don't know. Like, can that be considered free speech? So it's free speech as long as you say the nice stuff. If you say crazy stuff, it's not free speech anymore. I think he's going to have a tough time.
I definitely agree.
Which is why I think he's really into. So my theory is he, for $110 per user, he got a cheap deal. He got 400 million users he can push out messaging to.
Hold on a second. Did you do cheap on purpose?
No. Why?
Twitter. It's a bird. That's fantastic.
No,
anyway.
I what?
I'm sorry. I was too perfect to.
I'm not that smart. Thank you for giving me the credit for that, but I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I meant cheap.
Right. Yeah.
$110 a user. I'm involved with companies where our CAC is $150, $200 a user.
Yeah.
He got Twitter for $110 a user, 400 million people. If I had 400 million people I could message to, I'd be like, rent apartments. Here's the address.
Right,
like, I'd fill my buildings up quickly.
Yeah.
What a great platform that is. I mean, it's way more powerful than any TV network, radio station, film, Netflix. I mean, 400 million people, I think, could be the biggest.
Well, and I think Twitter also, that's the interesting thing that we'll see, is that Twitter is one of the oldest of the social medias, and yet it still remains very relevant, as opposed to, I would say, like Facebook or Meta, is starting to slide in terms of its relevance. I think that's why Zuckerberg's heading in that kind of VR metaverse direction.
Yeah.
Twitter has remained pretty relevant in the way that it's been handled so far with Jack Dorsey and everything like that. So I'm interested to see how that will be maintained.
I like Twitter because rather than having the opportunity be to rant on and on and on ad infinitum about like whatever you're vomiting that day, like you have a finite amount of characters, get your message out, make it short and sweet and to the point, and make it effective. I mean, it forces everybody to really distill it down to a clearly delivered message. So I always like that about Twitter. I appreciated that, but I think he's in it for the 400 million users. I think he's in it for the $110 per user, the customer acquisition cost, and I think he's in it to fight Apple with the cars and have a platform to message and push his cars for Tesla.
Yeah,
and he's going to turn 50 billion into 250 billion pretty darn quick. You watch.
Yeah.
Big move.
All right. Well, we shall see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Peter.
Thanks,
I'll
George.
See you over Q&A. Peter, ready for some Q&A?
Q&A, baby. Let's go.
Q&A. This is Harrison Thomas asking this question.
Harrison Thomas.
Yeah. He says, I'm a small business owner. Business is good. And I'm getting to the point where I'm going to be hiring several employees to help us grow. What do I need to do to create long-term, dedicated employees?
All right. Listen. Great question, Harrison. What I look for when I hire people to work with me is a few things. So first of all, I'm way less concerned about where they went to school, what degrees they have, if they've got master's degrees or graduate degrees, grade point averages. None of that matters to me. In my business, I can teach anybody anything. It's way more important for me to get a sense and a feel that the candidate has loyalty, has integrity, and has grit and determination. I want someone who's going to show up early, stay late, ask a lot of questions, have a quest for learning and knowledge, who wants to grow and who wants to succeed and move forward and do better. I want someone, Harrison, who's going to run through walls and take bullets. I can tell within 30 or 60 seconds what the candidate has and if they've got those traits. After that, it's more me getting to know them on a personal level, but I can sniff it out. Anybody who's in business can sniff it out very quickly. Now look, once they make a decision to work with you, you have to make life great. You have to make work great. Work's a third of our lives. You want someone who's working with you to feel like, I like working with Peter or Harrison, and I like working in this office environment. So make sure your office culture is attractive to your target employee base. Make sure that the office looks right from a design perspective. Is it in a basement with fluorescent lighting, or is it out in the open with lots of light and air and modern furniture and fixtures? And is there artwork, and is there music? And if so, what's playing? Everything should be curated in your office because it's your culture, it's your environment. This is where people spend their time. And it all starts with you as the leader, as the owner. Don't ask or expect anybody else in the organization to create culture. Culture starts with you. It's your company. You dictate and create the culture and set the culture and tone with everybody else. That's expectations. That's everything that would appear in an employee handbook, what the rules and regs are for working there, times to come and go, dress code, everything. But then the little stuff too. Do you have a fridge stocked with juices and seltzers? Maybe that's attractive for your team. Maybe it's not. I don't know. We do. You know, the music that plays, there's a few Pandora channels or starting points that are acceptable in our case, and then everything else just, you know, I want a certain culture. So you should seek a certain culture, whatever that is for you, and watch people buy into it and get them to buy into it. Harrison, have a list of expectations, goals, and objectives. Have a mission that everybody knows what the mission is. Write it down. Post it on the wall. You should state what the mission of your company is, what you seek to achieve, what problems you're seeking to solve. And when you post your mission on a wall and everybody can look at it and read it every day as they come and go in and out of the office, it's going to absorb into them and seep into them, and they're going to adopt similar principles and be able to carry out this mission that you've established. So make sure that everybody knows where the ship is headed, and you have to communicate that. So clear goals and objectives, have a mission that's clearly stated, and make sure everyone knows what that is. Reiterate it at company meetings, monthly meetings, budget meetings, whatever your frequency is for getting your team together. State the mission and give people tasks within the mission. Hey, Bob, can you tell me, what do you think we're doing lately to achieve our mission? What do you think we could be doing better? Open up the floor for discussion. Have everybody participate in that. People want to participate, and you need them to participate. Don't be a leader or a boss or a company owner that just dictates, and just expect people to toe the line. You want people to participate and feel like they're creating something with you, because in fact, that's what they're doing. Whether you like it or not, Harrison, as a boss, that's what they're doing. They're creating it with you. So you have to be open to everyone's input. Make sure they feel that and make sure you're imparting that.
Cool. Well,
that was a lot of stuff, George.
That was a lot of stuff, but
just tell me to shut up.
No, but I was going to say I won't have to do any editing with that segment though, because that was all great stuff.
It was all regurgitation. It was all bleh.
Yeah, no, that's all great.
All right.
Cool. All right, well, see you next time.
Thank you.
If you like what you just heard, you can subscribe to The Daily Cash Flow on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'd love it if you left us a review. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at SiegelCap and on Instagram at Siegel.cap. As always, if you're an accredited investor, go to SiegelCapital.com and take our survey to see if you qualify to take part in one of our apartment building deals. That's SIEGEL Capital.com.